Hello to Rainer Wein, the political podcast. My name is Michael Winkler. I have the great pleasure today, Jordi Vilanova. It's a great pleasure to have you here today.
It's my pleasure being here.
You were brought up in London with a Swedish mother.
That's right.
And a Catalonian father.
Yes.
He was in Paris too, so you are...
he was born in Paris.
He was born in Paris. So you have a lot of experience of Europe. You're a European citizen.
Yeah, as I say in my blog, I'm a Western European because I do realize that there are different experiences of life, society and politics in different areas of Europe. Mm-hmm. So I have some knowledge and some experience of the north of Europe, the west of Europe and the southwest of Europe. And obviously now the Eastern experience has come to the fore. So I'm learning about that, but I don't have personal experience of that.
So you're really a European citizen?
Oh yeah, definitely.
You have a lot
I feel very European, yes.
And
I think like many people nowadays, we have several identities. Some people have difficulties in marrying these identities, and sometimes they feel that they're contradictory. But perhaps I'm lucky and I don't feel that there are contradictions. Obviously there are differences, but I think it helps me understand different societies as well.
So you had all your educations in London?
Yep.
You were brought up in London?
Yeah.
How was your experience from the part of London to see the situation in your home countries, Catalonia and Spain?
Let's see. One of my identities is I'm a Londoner.
Okay.
And I had many friends. Many have had to leave because of the cost of living there.
London is really expensive.
Yeah. My experience as a Londoner was a young man, a child, a young man, went to school, started working there, and very few of my friends really knew anything about Catalonia. So some would go to Lloret de Mar for their holidays. Barcelona wasn't really very present at that time. It hadn't won its international identity that it won with the Olympic Games. So it was a bit difficult to try and explain what was going on. I'm talking about, the common people in London. But I was perfectly integrated there. I mean, I was born, brought up there, and I lived London society, yeah.
So what was your decision to come back to Barcelona, to come back to Spain?
It was quite difficult at that time because as a young man, I had a girlfriend.
In London?
Yes, I had...
And you asked her to come with you?
No, because I came over with my family. My girlfriend was more friend than bride-to-be.
Okay.
You know? But in fact, I went to Barcelona, to Catalonia, to experiment really, to see what it was like. And the thing is that I never went back. My boss, the people I was working for and who were training me, I was a trainee manager. Sorry, I was a trainee manager with a corporation. They said to me, if you're back within the year, you'll have your job waiting for you. Which I think was... Yeah, I think that was a mistake.
And your decision to go to Spain again, it was a tough decision for you?
No, because the intention was to experience. Yeah, I mean, I was 22. It was a new experience. I would learn. I would always had the option of going back if I didn't like it. So it wasn't really a tough decision for me. It was a different society. It was much more different than the difference between London and Barcelona at that time was much greater than it is now. Barcelona has become an extremely multicultural society, not quite as much as London, but I don't see why there wouldn't be a Muslim mayor of Barcelona in, say, 10 years, perhaps. I don't know. I wouldn't have any trouble with that. I would have voted the current mayor of London myself if I would still lived in London, for example.
But the lifestyle in Spain is completely different than in London.
It's different. I wouldn't say completely different. London's changed a lot as well. Barcelona's changed enormously. London has also changed a lot. I live in central Barcelona in an area called Alborn, which is very fashionable, and perhaps something like Soho or Camden Town, something like that. You go to Soho now, and you walk along pedestrian streets, and you have terraces there, and people in the street chatting. Exactly the same atmosphere as in central London. Some parts of central London and central Barcelona are very similar now. Catalan society has always been a very liberal society, liberal in the essential sense, not in the political ideology, but in its true sense, yeah? A very open society, open to new ideas, to new things. Catalonia led Spain during the industrial age. So I think that it's always been an open society. It's been open to change. And it has evolved. Some may like it, some may like it less or more, but it's evolved, as have many other societies. I imagine, I love Vienna.
Thank you.
I've been here, this is my third visit, and I imagine that 20 or 30 years ago, Vienna was a different place. I'm sure. I mean, you know, societies evolve. So, yes, Barcelona was very different from London, but then London is now very different from the London in the 1970s, 1980s.
So you have been 22. Have you been interested in the political situation in these days? You were gone back to Spain?
The political situation in Spain, yes, enormously interested. And I was very much involved. My father was very much involved in politics on his return. He was one of the founders of a small political party, which wasn't very successful because at the time, independence was not one of the leading ideas in Catalan politics or in Spanish politics. But in the last years, as you well know, politics has evolved enormously in that sense. Unfortunately, it's a pity my father didn't live to see that.
Okay.
Because he died at quite a young age, at 56.
Sorry about this.
Well, that's life. But I feel that I'm carrying on the same struggle.
You told me about your grandfather.
Yes.
And your influences for your life from your grandfather. Would you like to tell our viewers some parts of your grandfather?
Yeah, I don't know how familiar your audience is with Spanish history, but in the 1920s, before the Republic, the Democratic Republic that came in through municipal elections in 1931, and the republic that died with the military uprising of General Franco, the dictator, there had already been another dictatorship led by another general, Primo de Rivera, General Primo de Rivera.
Or military generals?
A military general, exactly. I mean, you know, there's always been a long history of military uprisings in Spain, which I think South America inherited, perhaps.
If you have the weapons, you have the power.
Yeah, exactly. And we know that this is the case in other parts of the world. So at that time, it was only natural for the Spanish to decide that they had had enough with democracy. And so the army made an uprising. That general, when my grandfather lived and was a political activist, My grandfather was forced to flee. He went to France, and because of different
situations. He was a refugee and he went out of Spain?
Exactly, already then. So we're talking about the 1920s with a previous dictatorship, military dictatorship. My grandfather died in Paris from pneumonia, from a common... remember, the penicillin is relatively recent, so there wasn't even penicillin. He died from pneumonia. My father was born in Paris, and then my grandmother and my father returned to Barcelona. But then, unfortunately, the Civil War began. And so they fled again to Paris, where they had friends. And then, of course, you had the other military invasion by the Nazis.
Germans? Yeah.
I prefer to say the Nazis.
Nazis, okay.
Than the Germans, because I have German friends and
I
don't have problems with the Germans.
Okay, I agree.
And of course they had to flee, and they ended up in London, where they were pretty much lost. I mean, there are other refugees from Catalonia, from other parts of Spain. And there was a little community there, and there my father began to become an activist for the internationalization of the Catalan situation, of the political situation in Spain, with demonstrations in front of the Spanish embassy there in the 1960s and 70s. And that was my baptism, my political baptism. Okay. So you asked me, it was difficult to go to Catalonia. As I say, from a personal, very personal point of view, not really. I was a young man. It was a new adventure, but also because I wanted to continue with this activism, yes. Mm-hmm.
It was really difficult for your father from Spain to come to London.
He arrived in London when he was 13. Okay. So he was very young. Really, when you're 13 and teenager, an early teenager, you probably have difficulties initially, but you quickly... He spoke English perfectly, like an English person. Mm-hmm. He could have been English. He could have simply forgotten about Catalonia and about Spain and just accommodated himself in, as many refugees do, as many immigrants do. They adopt the life of the locals and just blend in. But my father was very much politically oriented by my grandfather, obviously.
Okay.
So this has become a little bit of a...
So he was influenced?
Almost genetic.
Yeah. Maybe from father to the son too.
To grandson.
Of course.
Yes. Yeah. So, as I say, I was very much a Londoner. I mean, I could have forgotten all about it as well. But I was very interested in continuing this. And also my father, you asked about my father. My father wanted to fight against Nazism, for example, against fascism, against Nazism, because he had been forced out of his land because of fascism in the case of Franco's army. And he, in fact, volunteered to fight for the British Army.
He was a volunteer?
He was a volunteer in the British Army, yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because it was his decision to do that?
It was his decision. I mean, the British citizens, they were conscripted. My father volunteered. But then you have to remember that many Europeans volunteered to come and fight against fascism in the Spanish Civil War as well. So I think, and there are many people who are going to Ukraine now to fight for the democratic freedom of, at least as far as they see it, it's the democratic freedom of the Ukrainian people.
So in my opinion, your father was a hero. Of course, because he decided by himself and he was not forced to do that.
Yes. Is that heroism?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, well.
In my opinion, it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But doing something that you feel in your heart...
That's passion.
That's passion.
Yeah.
Perhaps not heroism, but, well...
Maybe passion. Yeah.
Okay, I'll accept heroism.
Yeah, I think it's the same. Yeah.
Okay. But yes, certainly. Although I don't consider myself at all a hero, I do live the Catalan situation with passion, yes. Yes.
So for Catalonia, 2006 was a very important year.
Yes, there was an alignment of political situation in Spain, in Catalonia and in Barcelona. Barcelona City Hall was governed by the Socialist Party, the Catalan branch of the Spanish Socialists. Catalonia was run by a socialist government, again the Catalan branch of the Spanish Socialist Party, and Madrid, the central government, was run by the PSOE, the Spanish Socialist Party. So it was a perfect storm. It was, at least people expected it to be the perfect alignment of the situation, whereby a new statute could be established for greater freedom of the Catalan people, but not independence. The problem was that many Spanish unitary unionist centralists saw it as an attempt to federalize Spain.
Okay.
And the true Spanish nationalists are extremely unitary, Jacobin, extremely centralist. In fact, probably more centralist than the French centralists now. France is also, yes, because France has begun to accept that it is made up of different peoples, of different societies with different points of view. So it has changed as well. As I say, I mean, nations, cities, people change. So the Spanish, these unitary Jacobin centralist Spanish socialists and also conservatives, so in some cases ultra-conservatives, and these ultra-conservatives have now shown their true faces and formed a far-right wing party, Vox. At that moment, they took the constitution to the Constitutional Court. Now, in the German-speaking world, especially in Germany, I'm not so sure about Austria, but the Constitutional Tribunal, the Constitutional Court is like God. But in Spain, they are very highly politicized. They are appointed by the political parties, the major parties, which are the socialists and the conservatives, and of course, predominantly unitary centralist.
Okay.
So they struck down several articles, which I think we mentioned earlier in our conversation prior to this interview. Some of these articles that have been struck down or reinterpreted by the tribunal, a curious thing, because that is adopting the legislative function of, rather than the jurisprudence function, reinterpreted how that article ought to be. Some of these articles, struck down or reinterpreted, feature in other statutes of other autonomous regions in Spain, and they haven't been struck down. But anyway, well, let's leave that aside. What happened there was that the whole procedure had been followed legally, absolutely legally. It had been to the Spanish Congress, modified, approved by the Spanish Congress, returned to Catalonia, and approved by the Catalan people in a referendum, which is the legal procedure for modification of the statute, which is the basic law of each of the regions in Spain.
Okay.
So there was a huge feeling that there was great injustice, and I think that many of the unto then autonomist or not independentist parties, especially the Catalan conservatives or centre-right, realized that much of their electorate was shouting for independence.
Okay.
As a reaction to this, what they felt was a great injustice, because all the proper procedures had been followed carefully.
Okay.
So that brought us to 2012, a massive more than 1 million people in the streets in a demonstration.
1 million people.
Over 1 million.
Wow.
I'm not sure if we
That's
reached...
a sign. That's a clear sign.
Yeah. Some people say 1.5 million.
Okay, yeah.
let's just call it 1 million.
It depends on the mainstream or the real.
Right, exactly. Let's just call it 1 million, not 1.5 million. I try to be more realistic.
Okay.
I mean, that's amongst the most massive demonstrations there has been. And amongst those, many of them were people who, until then, were just happy with the autonomous regime that was ruling, and were quite happy with the new statute. But they saw it as a great injustice. So the main parties, the main Catalan parties, the centre-right, more or less conservative, the centre-left, and the radical left, let's call it, not extreme left, but radical left, I don't know, the Link in Germany. Is that my correct pronunciation?
Die Linke.
Die Linke.
Die Linke.
Exactly, something like that. So there are a massive range of political opinions, of political ideologies, all in favor of moving for independence. Moving for independence, not simply declaring independence, moving for independence through a legitimate referendum.
Okay.
Which brings us to 2017.
17. It's October?
1st of October 2017.
1st of October 2017.
Okay. Legislation had been passed through the Catalan Parliament.
21st of December was a selection, 2017. And the first of October was the referendum.
The referendum,
okay.
That's right. And I think perhaps all of your audience, the majority of your audience, saw what happened there, where the Spanish sent the Spanish police, the Spanish paramilitary Guardia Civil in and just started sort of attacking the people who were simply going to put a piece of paper in a plastic box.
So you see the power of a piece of paper.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. The power, the will of the people. Now, you may or may not be in favor of independence of Catalonia, that this is a big problem. Why should the Catalans want to be independent? Perhaps they are just self-centered and they don't want to pay so many taxes, etc. Perhaps part of the Catalan population doesn't want to pay more taxes.
Okay.
But
so it's all
some
about
of us,
it's all about money too.
But it's not all about money. It's a part of the issue is money, but also the freedom, the fairness, the justice of having gone through legal, legitimate procedures, exactly as the Spanish Constitution defined, and they're just having it thrown out of the window because they didn't like it. So they say that the Catalans did a coup d'etat with this referendum and the Declaration of Independence, but I think that they started the whole process off by doing a coup d'etat on a perfectly legitimate, properly organized process of changing the statute.
In this time, it was Jordi Sanchez in power. Is this correct?
No, Jordi Sanchez was the president of the organization that I have come here to represent. The
Assemblea, Nacional.
Assemblea Nacional de Catalunya, which is the Catalan National Assembly. It's a grassroots organization. It's self-financed by the membership fees.
So it's independent?
Totally independent.
Okay.
It does not accept any monies from any state or Catalan government funding or any funding from the political parties. It means to remain independent of all political parties and certainly of any public administration.
And Jordi Sanchez was the president.
He was the president of the ANC at that time. He has become involved in party politics. Okay, our organization defined.
He was a professor on the university.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
That's right. An academic, a very well-respected academic. In fact, he was a left-leaning, ideologically left-leaning academic. But people evolve again. And so now he's with a party that defines itself as center-right in general. Both main independence parties are sort of umbrella parties. In other words, they cover broad swathes of ideology, but generally more center-right on one hand, Junts per Catalunya, and more center-left of Esquerra Republicana, with the CUP, which is again radical, and I don't mean radical in the negative sense, and from the root. In other words, they want to really go drill down into left-wing politics. Some people call them Marxists, some people call them anarchists, or anarchists and Marxists don't really merge very well ideologically, but that's what they call them. I prefer to call them radical left-wingers. So again, a really broad swathe from conservatives across to as left as you can go.
But Jordi Sanchez had to go to prison, right?
That's right. Jordi Sanchez, along with the leader of Òmnium Cultural, which is another grassroots organization, called for a demonstration in front of a Catalan government department, the Department of Economy, which was being searched by the Spanish Guardia Civil, the paramilitary police, with a representative from one of the courts, one of the judges that was investigating some form of misuse of funds for the means or the ends of an independence process. So that's deemed illegal. Jordi Sanchez and Jordi Cuixart, my own name is also Jordi. Jordi Cuixart.
It's a very famous name in Spain.
George is the patron saint of Catalonia. So it's not Spain, it's Catalan, very Catalan. They were taken to court, they were processed and jailed for having called demonstrations.
Just for that?
That's right.
That sounds not very democratic.
No, it doesn't sound very democratic, no. And in fact, it is not very democratic at all. They were charged with sedition and revolt, calling a demonstration and getting the Catalan people to express their opinion, their political opinion, before an action that they didn't agree with, but without any use of violence, is deemed subversion, sedition, revolt.
What was the part of Carlos Puigdemont in this time?
Carlos Puigdemont at that time had taken over from Artur Mas, who was the leader of the centre-right party, the Conservatives. I mentioned that some of the parties saw their electorate, even the centre-right, saw their electorate in the demonstration shouting for independence in 2012, in 2010, etc. And they suddenly realized, okay, our electorate is calling for independence, we're going to become pro-independence. Artur Mas was forced out of the leadership of his party by the pressure of the radical left. And so Puigdemont took over as the leader of the centre-right, and in fact led the government, because they had the majority, led the government in coalition with Esquerra, in a coalition called Junts per Sí. It's Together for Yes.
He said a very important sentence: "We are independent." Carlos
Yes.
Puigdemont.
He said, "We are independent."
We are independent.
You mean the Declaration of
Declaration,
Independence?
yes.
Oh, yes, certainly. I mean, that was sometime later.
But he didn't stop at this sentence. He said one sentence more. We had to talk about, And if he wouldn't have said this sentence, Catalonia would
personally, and a lot of people think that was a grave mistake, because the situation was a situation where, if he had gone ahead with this, there were fears that violence would ensue, that the Spanish paramilitary police, the Spanish army, even the Spanish army might intercede there. And I think that this fear, and people say, it has been said that from the European Union, Donald Tusk in particular, although that hasn't been proven, and I'm not sure that Donald Tusk has confirmed this, but that if the Catalan government would negotiate, then they would mediate with the Spanish government.
Okay.
So I'm not sure, it's very difficult really to know exactly what happened. Perhaps you might like to
it's very interesting, but it's really difficult.
Invite Mr. Puigdemont sometime. He was
He was in Innsbruck. We had an appointment, and we were planning to go to Innsbruck.
Okay.
And he said he just have 10 minutes.
Okay.
And in 10 minutes you can't ask a really important question. 10 minutes, it's impossible.
Yeah.
So we like to get the contact for an interview with him, and we have to ask him some really
I think
important
that
questions.
Many journalists have written about what happened, but really, I don't know when we will know. Things end up being known, but the truth behind all that, particularly the offer of mediation. In any case, the fear was there, the fear of bloodletting. Some people say that if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. But of course, having to take that kind of decision is very difficult. So he withdrew 8 seconds later, he withdrew the declaration pending negotiations with the Spanish state. And the Spanish state turned around and suspended. Sorry?
He had to escape from Spain?
The Spanish government, the Spanish state turned around and said, no negotiations, we're suspending the Catalan government. And of course, some of the ministers remained, some of the ministers went to Belgium and found refuge in Belgium, as had my grandfather.
Okay.
I'm not sure I mentioned that, but from Paris he went to Belgium for some time and then eventually returned to Paris. So Belgium seems to understand a little about our situation, and particularly the judges there take free speech, free assembly, human rights, civil rights very seriously. And I think that is something. And of course, the Spanish state has certain agreements with countries like France or other countries where perhaps they wouldn't feel so safe.
Okay.
Belgium doesn't really have any interests in keeping Spain happy.
They're independent.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Much like Austria.
Yeah, we have also these days the big problems. We are depending on Russia.
Yeah.
Our government, in the last 20 years, everything was organized with Putin. Yeah, and so we are completely depending on the gas and on the power of Putin. And this is a really, I don't know the situation in Spain. How is the independence?
I think we get something like 20% of our gas from Russia, but it's fairly easily replaceable with gas from North Africa. And we already have some liquid natural gas I'm not sure what the term is, stations or whatever, to be able to import liquid natural gas. Obviously, that's going to be more expensive, but the facilities are there. So I don't think we're going to have too much of a problem from that point of view. But I can understand why Austria did that and why Germany did that, etc., because we didn't expect the Russian attitude until 2014. I think that perhaps 2014 should have opened our eyes to Russia.
We should have expected this.
Yeah. Yes.
From the last 20 years, of course, it was clear. Yeah. From the military part of view, it was clear. Yeah.
Well, 2008 Georgia.
Yeah.
2014
Crimea.
East Ukraine. Yeah. Crimea. Yeah.
How is
people, the problem is, and this is the situation, for example, with the Spanish Civil War. I mean, there are people who are saying, no, we should not be sending arms to Ukraine because, of course, more arms simply means more violence, more death. Yes. But if in the Spanish Civil War, the democratically elected Republican government had been assisted, upheld by France, by the UK, by the United States, Spain would have been a totally different country. Franco got his weapons from Italy and Germany, Nazi Germany.
Okay.
Italy bombed Barcelona. The Italian Air Force bombed Barcelona. I think that it would have been a whole other story. It's really very pitiful having to see a war like the one in Ukraine, but I always think of what happened in the Spanish Civil War, where the big democratic states did not back up a democratically elected government, while the far right, the Nazis, the fascists, backed up the Franco government, the army uprising. So I see, from that point of view, I sympathize very much with the Ukrainians. I can understand certain positions. I respect pacifists, but the problem with pacifism is you have to create an architecture for peace in time of peace. You can't fight for peace while there's someone breaking down your door. And so again, I see these parallelisms in the Spanish Civil War in Ukraine for a people fighting for democracy. I think that at this moment, and I really feel very much that we are at a turning point in history where, okay, you may not agree with the liberal order. It's the Americans who are dominating everything.
I ask myself, who is really interested in the war of Ukraine? Who is interested?
Well,
the weapons lobby,
Lockheed, Raytheon in America. It's great, wonderful.
Of course, it's big business.
Yeah, it's great, big business. But they didn't start the war. I don't know whether they had some input for Putin to get him to. I don't think that's the case. I mean, you know, the CIA have been in Chile, in Argentina. The American army has been in Nicaragua, El Salvador, etc., historically. Okay, so they're no saints. But I know when we need to fight for democracy, we need to fight for liberal democracy. And again, I'm not talking about the political ideology or the liberal economicist liberalism. I'm talking about freedom, liberalism as in freedom. And I know that Putin is not bringing freedom to Ukraine. So again, I see all these parallelisms coming up again. Well, this is simply personal now. I know it has nothing to do with your interest in the situation in Spain and in Catalonia, but really, these are parallelisms.
Thank you for this nice interview. That's a really nice sentence.
My pleasure.
I really appreciate.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
That was Reiner Wein with a very special guest. Thank you so much. My name is Michael Winkler.